Welcome to the December 2023 update on the performance of my solar array. So in this video I'm going to talk about our performance in December, the year as a whole, and do a bit of a comparison to prior years for you as well. And I'll also throw in some comments on whether I think it's worth it or not. Okay, the disclaimer, please pause and read, and let's get straight into the numbers. So for the entire year of 2023 we have produced 6,932 kilowatt hours of electricity. Compared to last year, we produced 5,997 kilowatt hours, so we are up 935, which is about 15%. So keep in mind that we added 4 extra solar panels onto the house, and so pretty much all of this additional production is attributed to 4 panels pointing much closer to the correct direction. Looking at electricity import, we have imported 6,713 kilowatt hours in 2023. Compared to the year before, we imported 3,080, so we have pulled an additional 3,633, or an additional 118%. So that is massive, and it's like I've been saying all year, it's due to the electric car. We are charging off-peak from the grid compared to the year before, where we drove a lot less and we had free credit from Audi to use up. But if I rewind to the year before that, we managed to reduce our electricity consumption from the grid by 54%. So this is because we were using solar power, we were barely charging the car at home, and so we were able to meet half of our needs by the solar production. And this year we've managed to double it again because we're now charging the car from the grid. But at least it's much cheaper than buying petrol or diesel. Looking at gas, in 23 we pulled 30,807 kilowatt hours from the grid. The year before we pulled 34,717, so we've managed to reduce our consumption by 3,910, or 11%. If I compare to the year before that, we pulled 36,519 from the grid, so in that year we managed to reduce by 1,802, or 5%. So this is really, really good news. Partly it's because we are warming hot water using free solar power in the eddy, and we also did a bit of off-peak water heating, so the electricity has gone up but the gas has gone down. It's also partly because on one portion of our house I replaced the thermostat and the programmer with a smart one with a Tado system, and that manages to optimize and maintain and regulate the temperature in a more boiler efficient fashion. But there is a downside to that. The radiator thermostats from Tado can very easily become disconnected as you're trying to adjust the temperature using them. And when they become disconnected, what they default to is calling the boiler to produce heat permanently until you reconnect it. But the fact that the thermostat has become disconnected from the radiator, it doesn't alert you on the app. You've got no idea until you kind of notice that the boiler just seems to be always on. So that happened to us 2 or 3 times during the course of the year, where we've accidentally disconnected the thermostat from its valve. And so the boiler was burning for several days before we even noticed. Now, it's a dumb design by Tado. You should, in my opinion, it should be the other way around. If your thermostat's not working, it shouldn't work. You'll realise much quicker. But also, their mechanism to release the thermostat from the radiator valve is also a bit dumb. It's just too easy to do it, and they need to come up with a smarter system so that you don't accidentally disconnect it and then waste loads of money burning power, which the point of getting a Tado system was to try and save that money. Okay, looking ahead at CapEx, we did not spend any money on the system this year, so we have had maintenance, but that counts as OPEX, but it also isn't included in these metrics because we have maintained our pre-existing system, like servicing the boiler and troubleshooting problems with it, but we haven't invested any money in new equipment relating to the solar array, the batteries, the car, all of this equipment that I'm talking about here. So therefore I haven't attached any CapEx costs for 23. OPEX savings then, we have saved £5,840 in 2023 that we would otherwise have spent purchasing gas and electricity from the grid if we did not have any of this equipment. Last year we saved 2,773, So this year we've managed to save an additional £3,000 or an additional 111%. So that's fantastic, and it's largely to do with that we have a second battery, so we're really eking out as much as we can save. We are charging the car at home rather than buying diesel, so that's saving us a lot of money, and we're managing to heat our hot water for free or for cheap. Okay, moving on then. So data from NPhase. In the month of December, we produced 91.6 kilowatt hours of electricity. We exported 1.6, we imported 1.1 megawatts, and we therefore consumed a total of roughly 1.2 megawatt hours to service all of our needs. Looking at the graph, the grey sections are our electricity import from the grid. The blue slivers here are solar production, and the orange is basically the sum of the two. It's what the house consumed. So the orange always adds up to the other two because we consume everything in terms of solar production and import from the grid, because we store it in our battery. So you can see the production is pretty measly. It doesn't even get close to meeting our daily need. And we have a few spikes like days like this where we are charging the car as well. So it's never going to get close. But historically, December is the worst month for solar production here in the UK. So we have hit the bottom, and now we are on our way back up. If you have a look at the array on the right hand side, the back of the house, which faces west-northwest, is really not contributing much. But it's doing something. It keeps the fridge going, it keeps the microwave going, something like that. But the front of the house and the new panels on the summer house have done the majority of the work for the month of December. But overall, we were dependent on the grid for 92% of all of our power. Looking at the best and the worst days, so the best day was the 11th of December. We produced 8.4 kilowatt hours, and the worst day was the 19th of December. We produced 0.5. So that really is terrible. I think it was cloudy, rainy, overcast, looked like it was going to snow. And so no rays of sunshine managed to get through those clouds and bounce off our solar panels. You see massive demand overnight, so that's us charging the battery and charging the car overnight. If you recall in an earlier video, I have permanently set the battery to charge to 95% overnight, so that we have plenty of capacity to meet our daily need, and we don't run out at 6 p.m. ish and then have to pull peak time electricity. So I've managed to get that about right. We do have a few days where we have a lot of sunshine, and days where we're producing 7, 8, 9 kilowatts. We might end up exporting back to the grid because the batteries become full. So although we'd rather use that and put it in the car and put it in the hot water or something, I mean, the eddy will soak up whatever energy it wants to, and then the surplus goes to the grid. But it's just easier to have it configured at 95% and allow ourselves to lose a bit of energy back to the grid, rather than keep on having to fiddle with a battery optimization every day based on the weather forecast. So as I said before, Give Energy have been promising since I got this equipment, so we're over 2 years down the line, that they're going to bring an integration with the weather so that it can see what tomorrow's forecast is and then optimize the charge level so that there is enough capacity remaining to top it up with the sunshine. But they still haven't released it, and who knows when they will. So my advice to you is, if you're buying equipment from any brand and they haven't released a feature that you want, and they claim that they're going to release it imminently, don't believe them. Wait until the feature is out, or go and choose a different brand where the feature is already out, because I think they just all like to dangle the carrot in front of you to suck you in, and then don't deliver on the things that they say they're going to in the time frame they say they're going to. Okay, moving on to household electricity consumption. We're looking at the bar over here on the far right hand side. So of the solar power that we imported 563 kilowatts of electricity from the grid to meet our household demand. We imported this amount over here, which looks like we produced about 50-60 kilowatt hours of sunshine, which went to meet our house. We used 517 kilowatt hours from the grid off peak to charge the car. There is a tiny sliver here that we used at peak time to charge the car, like 1 or 2 kilowatts, and then you can see there's a tiny sliver here that we put into the eddy. Basically nothing, because we don't have any surplus solar during the month of December to go into the eddy, and it's not set to heat the hot water from the grid overnight. So it's basically not doing anything at the moment, apart from those odd days where we top up the battery because there is more sunshine than we expected, and then it goes into the eddy. So overall, our consumption is on par with November. We do have a tiny bit of export. I think we said it was 1.6 kilowatts earlier on. But overall, our consumption of electricity is high. If you kind of look compared to the previous months, we are pulling an extra 100 kilowatt hours compared to October and September, these kind of months, and compared to the summer last year. So I guess it's a lot to do with the car. Okay, moving on to talk about gas. So overall, we used 4,654 kilowatt hours of gas to warm up our house and do a bit of cooking during the month of December. So that's up on November. But then if I compare to December of last year, we used 5,698. So we're down 1,000 kilowatts. So that's massive. And if I compare to the December of the year before, we only used 3,340. So we're up over 1,000 kilowatts. So I'm not sure what's going on there. Probably a bit more cooking, or probably, the heating's burning more basically. And December of the previous year we used 4,498, which is approximately what we use this year. So it looks like 2021 December there was an anomaly. I can't remember why anymore. Maybe it was particularly warm, whereas the weather has been particularly cold in the December just gone. Okay, looking at Octopus. So if this is helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe, all that good stuff. It really helps me out. But let's look at Octopus. So this is the summary from my bill. They have charged me £101 for the electricity that we used in December. They've charged £182 for the gas for the main portion of our house, and £150 for the gas on the smaller portion of our house. They've also done something very odd. They've credited me for the small amount of export that I had since switching back to Octopus from the 24th of November to 31st December. So I got £1.26. But in the 5 months or 4 months that I'd actually switched to Scottish Power, Octopus seems to have backdated and credited me for the export. But Scottish Power also credited me for the export. So I've received the income twice. So that's not a bad hack if you can put up with the nonsense in Scottish Power. But let's see. They might realise what they've done and then claim it back. But at the moment, they've paid us all of these numbers that you see here for the prior months. Okay, if you do want to switch to Octopus and take advantage of getting paid twice for your export, you can use the link which is in the description to get referred to Octopus. You can call them using the kind of last part of the link and give them that code, and then both you and I will receive £50 off our next bill when you have completed your switch. Okay, installer estimates are probably my favourite chart. We produced 133% of what the installers said we would produce across the 2 years that we've had solar power. So they said we would produce 9,832. We actually produced 13,160. So that's an additional 33%. So I think being a third off the mark is quite a massive discrepancy from the installers and their forecasts that they give you. Like I keep on saying, that is a big enough discrepancy to ill-advise you, and basically you'll probably come to the decision that it's not worth getting solar power because the forecast isn't as good as you wanted. But what I'm saying is, in my case, their forecast was 33% off the mark. In terms of consumption, we consumed 12,074 kilowatt hours of the 13,000 that we produced. The installers said by the end of year 2 we would produce 4,916. So we have beaten their estimate by 246%. So back to the same point. If we are producing more than they say, and if we are consuming more than they say, then we are going to reach break even sooner than they say. And that is the key point here. If you reach break even sooner than they say, it changes the whole equation here, and you may change your mind on whether investing in solar power and all the equipment that I've got is worth it or not. Okay, so these are the headline messages. Those sorts of estimates that you get from your installer are basically rubbish because they don't ask you enough questions and fine-tune the estimates based on actual solar production or forecasts and your actual equipment and how you kind of use electricity in your house. They just kind of put it into a computer, churn out something to say they've given you something, but they're not held accountable on the accuracy of that information. The kind of green shaded areas and the blue shaded areas, the blue is the production, the green is the consumption. The aim of the game here is to try and minimize the gap between blue and green because we want to consume as much as we can out of what we produce. That way we're giving back the least amount to the grid and we are running our house as free as possible. So you can see, of course, as we get into the summer months, we are having big gaps because we are producing so much we don't know what to do with it. But as you get into the later months, we're managing to consume nearly everything that we produce. All right, let's get into the big spreadsheet of data. So for December, we produced 91.6 kilowatt hours. We exported 6. The house, overall, we consumed 85.6 kilowatt hours. Therefore, of that number, the house used 80.9, 4.7 went into the eddy, and we did not charge the car via solar power. From the grid, we imported 1,080 kilowatt hours of electricity and 4,654 kilowatt hours of gas. We have not spent any more money on capex. Our rates of import have stayed the same. However, our rate of export has gone up compared to being on Scottish Power. Overall, the house therefore saved £25 by having free solar power rather than buying that from the grid at peak time. We also saved £125 by charging our battery overnight at the cheap rate rather than buying peak time electricity. Okay, so having the battery configured to charge up has saved us an additional £125. Heating hot water via the eddy has saved us 32 pence, so barely any kilowatts have gone in there. Heating the hot water off peak on the eddy hasn't saved us anything because we haven't got it switched on. And in terms of export, we have earned £2.16 by exporting the 6 kilowatts that we did in December. But I've highlighted this whole section in red again because what I've done is I've combined the numbers that Octopus are paying us for all of these months together with what Scottish Power are paying us. So these numbers are all roughly double what they would normally be, but that's what I'm getting. We did not charge the car from solar, so we haven't saved anything. We did not charge the car with peak time electricity, so we haven't burnt anything there. We did charge the car a lot with off-peak electricity, and it's cost us £38. And we did charge the car using public charging points, which has cost us £70. Overall, with the amount of driving we did and the average price of diesel at my local petrol station, we have saved £380 worth of diesel. So when you net the EV numbers out, we have saved £271 in the month of December by having an EV and not driving around in a diesel car. That makes the total monthly savings for December £424.96. And if you add that to the pot, we have now saved £8,653 in just over 2 years since having this equipment. And that leaves us a balance of £14,837 until we break even. So that means we've paid off just shy of 37% of our entire investment. And on a linear basis, we are forecasting to break even in 5 years and 9 months from the beginning. So we're already 2 years into this. So basically about 4 years from now, we are expecting to break even. So those are fantastic numbers. Okay, I would underline what I keep on saying, that I do think having solar equipment is worth it, but I recognise that it's a massive investment that we've put in, and you definitely get economies of scale by having a bigger array, but that's because we need it. In your case, you may not need such a big array, and so it takes longer. But I think the game changers in this whole thing is actually by having a battery, we are managing to store solar power that we have earned for free, or we are able to purchase electricity from the grid at a quarter of the normal price. So that on its own is saving us massive amounts on our bills. And then when you throw in the electric car, where we are paying nothing, or we are paying 7.5p per kilowatt hour, compared to, I think it works out to 40p equivalent for diesel. So it's about 7, 8, 9, 10 times cheaper to have an electric car than it is to have a combustion engine. So again, having an electric car and having a battery are the two things which have really turned the tables on this whole equation. Having the solar panels is good, but solar panels alone will still take you quite some time to reach break even. And that's because you can't store the surplus power you're generating during the day for a time when you actually need it. And in the winter months, your solar panels are barely doing anything, right? They're just sitting there on your roof. So in my case, in the winter months, although the solar panels are not doing much, the battery is working hard every day, and it's managing to save us a lot of money on the bill. And then, of course, having the electric car is just cheaper than having a diesel car. So looking at the graph, the payback curve, the aim of the game is to get this green line here to catch up with the blue line up there. So we are motoring away now. As I said, we have paid off just over 8k, so we're 37% of the way there until we hit break even. Okay, so more good news. So I said I would talk a little bit about the year as a whole and do a bit of a comparison. So I've just done a one-pager here to show you what's what. So first of all, let's look at the chart on the left-hand side. What this is doing is showing you the amount that we have produced in terms of solar power for each calendar month. And it's put the years side by side. So although we produced more power overall in 2023, you can see by this graph, and that's because we had the extra solar panels, right? So you can see that they're starting to do some work a little bit longer, like into November. There's a slightly different shade of blue here. So this brighter blue means more power and this darker colour means less power. So you can see June of this year, we managed to produce more than June of last year, partly because we probably have 4 extra panels. Although that's pretty much all it says actually. Looking on the right hand side then, for the array in 2022, this is what each panel in our array contributed. You kind of have to ignore the array at the very bottom on the summer house because that was only live for about 3 or 4 days of the year because we installed it over Christmas. But looking at 2023, you can see the full complement here. So let's do a bit of a comparison. The panels on the front of our house facing southeast, they're producing 390 kilowatt hours, 374 kilowatt hours. If I compare to 2023, 362, 347. So we are down 20 or 30 kilowatt hours per solar panel on the front of our house, roughly, year on year. Okay, so we actually had more sunshine or more sunshine in the mornings in 22 compared to 23. Looking at the back of the house, so facing west-northwest, all these panels are producing about 250, 260 kind of kilowatt hours, and we've got this rogue one which is affected by shading on 170. Compared to 2023, we've got 245, 255, 248. So we're down a few kilowatts, maybe 5 to 10 kilowatts lower compared to 2022. But the rogue panel has got exactly the same as it happens, which is interesting. So being down 20 or 30 kilowatts per panel at the front and maybe 5 to 10 on the rear is being offset by the fact that we added these new panels for 2023, each producing about 340 each. So 7, 8, so about 1.5 megawatt hours has been generated from here. If you go back to the very first page and look at our year-on-year metrics, I said that we had produced an additional 935 kilowatts in 23 compared to 22. So you can see that this array produced 1.5 megawatt hours, so about 1500 kilowatt hours. But net, we're only up 935, which means all of these panels, when you sum them up, produced about 600 kilowatt hours less than they did in 2022. So that hopefully gives you an idea about the difference in sunshine and the intensity of sunshine that we've had in 23 versus 22. 22 was a sunnier year compared to 23, but looking at this production chart on the left, that doesn't say the same story, and that's because we have more panels managing to eke out production deeper into the year. So to close, do I think having solar panels is worth it? Yes, but if you can't afford to get all of the equipment that I've got, you don't have to buy it all in one go. You can buy it bit by bit and kind of add it onto your system as you go along. So if you had to decide on one thing to buy, my advice, buy a battery. That's the first thing to get. Ahead of buying solar panels, just buy a battery, switch onto the Octopus Go tariff or equivalent from a different provider, and set the battery to charge up every night to 100% in the winter months, and let it discharge during the day. That is going to quarter your electricity bill just like that. And you can see for the amount of power that we use in a day in our house, so our house is kind of standby load is about 20 to 25 kilowatts before you add on the car and everything else. So that means that paying 30 pence a kilowatt for 24 kilowatts, that's about £8 of electricity a day, not including the standing charge, right? Doing quick maths. So instead of paying £8 a day, I'm only paying 7.5p for those kilowatts if I was buying it. So that means I am paying, off the top of my head, roughly £1.50. Okay, if I divide the £1.50 to £2, somewhere in that ballpark is what I'm paying for electricity. So I'm paying, less than a quarter of what it would otherwise cost me. So although you might have to spend some money to invest in a battery, invest in the installation of the battery, etc., think about your electricity bill getting quartered. And then, therefore, how quickly will you recover that investment? And it might be worth it, right? You might get to break even within 2 years, 3 years, perhaps, depending on how big your consumption is, etc. And that changes the game. So that's what I think is worth it. An electric car, if you've got one, is definitely worth it, especially if you can get onto the Octopus Go tariff. That saves you money. And if you then have a battery, you can use that battery to charge your car as well if you needed to, although the car uses a lot more power than a battery can usually store, and then add on solar panels as well, and you are laughing for quite a few months of the year. So I hope you found it useful. Like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. I'm interested to hear how others. I know some of you are dotted around the country who follow this channel, so I'm interested to hear what your 23 production figures were, and if you've had panels for a few years now, throw in some comments about your year-on-year metrics. Do you see kind of similar things to me, that 22 was a sunnier year than 23 where you live? Let me know. But until the next time, I hope you find this helpful.